All right, it is 1:15 and we will get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Sauble Source Protection Authority meeting, Wednesday, April 24th, 2024. We'll call the meeting to order and the adoption of the agenda. I move that the agenda be adopted as distributed and amended. Do I have a mover, please? Member Shaw, and a seconder, and Member Maxwell. Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll go to the adoption of the minutes of February 28th, 2024 SPA meeting. And I will move that the minutes of the February 28th, 2024 Sauble Source Protection Authority meeting be adopted as distributed. May I have a mover and seconder, please? Member Bell, Member Dugan. Thank you. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Correspondence. A letter from the Source Protection Authority, Minister of Health. This is rather timely.
We couldn't plan these things if we wanted to. Yeah, so we added this piece of correspondence for the authority's awareness of what source protection committees and authorities have been concerned about based on the Auditor General's report. And there were a couple letters that were starting to be circulated, and we, as a source protection committee, felt the need to send a letter to the minister and the others in our region that support the concern about removing funding for private water testing. It's not directly in our authority, but under the Walkerton inquiry and the recommendations and our current goals to go and promote the principles of the source protection program across the whole region, not just for municipal systems, we felt it was appropriate to send a letter. We did that, and we had a number of municipalities and councillors who echoed their support of the letter. And this was happening in other regions across the province. So all of that seemed to be enough to have the government respond in the House in the last couple of days that they were going to back off on that recommendation, and that they're going to continue to support funding for private water testing. So nice to have that confirmation, and I think our approach was the right approach to send a letter and it just was a good way to let them know that we were concerned.
Excellent. It's really good news. Thank you. Thank you for bringing good news. It's really nice to have a good news story once in a while, and that one seemed to really take effect. So thank you for your efforts. Moving on to matters arising from the minutes, there are none at this time, so we will go to reports, and we will have an annual progress report.
Great. So we'll do sort of the high-level rundown of what was achieved through the program, the source protection program in 2023. And so this is a roll-up of reports from municipal monitoring policies, the risk management officials' work. So what we do on behalf of municipalities, but also what our partners and other municipalities do, as well as ministry reports. So I'll just go through some highlights in the summary, and then if there are any details or more specific information, we can dive into that. But since the program or the plan came into effect, we now have 174 risk management plans in the region approved with landowners, and so that we're in full compliance in terms of all the plans that needed to be implemented have been, which is a good milestone. There are plans now that are in the renewal cycle, so they've been in place for 5 years, and we have a requirement to renew them. So in a lot of cases, they're very straightforward. Not much has changed on the property, so they're very quick and easy. But in many cases, there may be new owners, there may be new activities, so we have to go and make those updates. And now we have some additional plans that are required because of the salt requirements so for salt application and storage. So we anticipate additional plans to come online in the next year to 2 years to deal with those threats. So we're in good shape that way. Inspections continue, and we do it on a risk-based or complaint-based approach. So if there are close to the wellhead any concerns or anybody has some issues around activities, we'll go in and do an inspection. We're also typically out in the watershed and we see things, and so we have a good sense of what's going on and good report back from our landowners. For official plan amendments, they've all been amended with the exception of Bruce County. We're hoping this is the year that Bruce County gets to amending their official plan. And that's important because there are a few municipalities that rely entirely on the county's plan for their bylaws and their official plan. So once that's all in place, then we'll have everybody in the region with their official plans to include source protection measures directly in their official plans. Septic systems now have all been completed where required. So that's another milestone. There were a few stragglers out there and we were able to get those done this past year. We do anticipate maybe some additional septics that may need to be inspected in the Lake Roslyn area, more on a mandatory but discretionary approach, and that will be at the municipality will have to make the decision whether to, if there are concerns or complaints, then they can go and do an inspection on the other septics that fall just outside the high vulnerable area. So that's a way to handle these sort of more vulnerable lakes. In terms of the Ministry of Environment, they continue to do their approvals and issue conditions within source protection areas if there's waste management or landfill sites or septic or sewage that's being hauled. So there are conditions if those activities are taking place in a vulnerable area. And so they let us know when they do issue those reports or reviews. And ultimately the plan is fully being implemented and all the policies are implemented. We do, as noted, we did make a couple changes to the salt policies. So we extended the implementation period for those new threats for salt handling and application. So we now have another sort of 2 or 3 years to roll out all the risk management plans that are needed for salt threats. And then the plan will then be again fully implemented. So really just a summary of what we completed in 2023 and a little bit of an indication of where we're going. The good news again is the ministry is supporting a 3-year funding agreement going forward for the program. So that's good sort of length of time for us to plan ahead and roll out additional program projects that we're planning to maintain the plan and any new systems that come online, making sure that they're incorporated into the plan. So open for any discussion or questions through the chair.
Thank you, Carl. You're just full of good news today. That's another excellent report. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Member Maxwell?
Thank you, Chair. And correct me if this correction or this question doesn't fit in there. So I got two questions here. How many people participating in a drill or in a communal well falls underneath the Ground Source Protection Act here?
Yeah, so our program only deals with municipal drinking water systems. So they have to be a municipally run system for the designation for a protection zone. In terms of communal systems, they currently fall outside of the jurisdiction of the program, other than we're looking at implementing some best practices in education and outreach to target those types of communal systems going forward to let either the health units or the municipalities know what we've learned under the source protection program that could benefit those systems.
Follow up?
So if there's a building being built within a ground source protection area, and the municipality issues a permit to construct a building based on it having a well system with many participants drawing water off that, how is that addressed? Is that addressed at the site plan approval process, or?
Yeah, so any development within a existing source protection zone must be screened under the Clean Water Act. And that can happen at the pre-consultation phase, at the planning phase, and at the building phase. And so they need to get a notice for potential threats or activities that could affect the municipal drinking water system. So we don't comment whether an offline communal system is being developed. We just comment on threats to the municipal source.
Okay, thank you.
Member Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Carl, just a follow-up or a little more information on the regulations around salt. Will that be salt storage, or will that be the application on roads within the area?
Yeah.
Or, you know, taking snowbanks off of and storage of, you know, the snowbanks that will have a salt content to them? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, please?
Yeah, good question. It's all those things. If it's in a high vulnerable area, being the 100-meter to the wellhead protection area B, so the close to the well. So we are going to be looking at application, storage, and snow storage as well. So if those things are taking place, then we would need a risk management plan and best practices to be incorporated into their activities. So a lot of municipalities have salt management plans in place and some don't. And so we started with counties, and we're going to use sort of what's commonly best practices for the region and make sure everyone's following the same rule book, so to speak, when it comes to application, storage of those things.
If I may, so 100 meter, within 100 meters, that's...
And it could extend into the protection zone B as well, which could stretch out to 300-400 meters from the well.
So my question then will be, will the Ministry of Transportation, like the Kings Highway, will they change their processes for keeping the highways dry?
So the standard of care is what's required in terms of road maintenance, and we're not changing what that standard of care is, or maintenance standard, whatever it is. Yeah. So the idea is that we're working with MTO, the counties, and the municipalities, so everyone is following the same rule book in terms of application rates, equipment used, and ideally over time, reducing the amount of salt in the high vulnerable areas where possible. So yeah, we can't say do not apply salt, because there are standards you have to meet to keep the road safe.
Thank you.
And the municipalities are probably already on board with smart road salt and good practices. I think we'll make more progress with maybe private contractors and others that apply larger amounts in these paved areas. So that's just right, you know, my current feeling about it, but as we roll it out, we'll get a better understanding.
Good luck with the MTO.
We have met with them, but yeah, we want to make sure everybody's on board.
Member Maxwell?
Kind of a follow-up question, Chair, to Member Mackey had there. So on the salt, so in the ground source protection area, let's say the village of Clarksburg in particular, it's designated as an area of concern. So will they have to develop an entire management plan to handle salt in that general area?
So the intent is that municipalities have salt management plans for salt application on roadways, and we would use what's in those plans and focus the concern from our perspective around the vulnerable wells or intakes. And highlighting those in the plan so that there's an awareness to minimize application in those zones.
Okay, thank you.
Member Gregg?
Again, on the salt, speaking of the MTO, in Owen Sound, we apply on the MTO Kings Highway. What I'm concerned with here is in a few years, there's going to be activities that, or a level of service or standards that we're not able to meet that perhaps get curtailed by policies coming out of this. How do you provide these policies and this information back through to municipalities so that councillors have the opportunity to review and provide input at different stages where input's needed? Because our level of service, you mentioned about a uniform level of service. Well, then I don't want to inherit in Owen Sound the level of service that might be in Aaron Eldersley or Grey Highlands. We have an acute need for a higher level of service. They can inherit ours and they can reduce their application adequately because there's a cost to it. Nobody wants to use more than you have to because it's a real cost and money coming out of your pockets. But I'm concerned that guidelines and policies get driven here where in a few years from now, elected officials are like, I had no idea this was being done. How are you communicating these initiatives back through to municipalities so that it's transparent and commenting can be done when needed?
Yeah, so that's a pretty good question in terms of, there's a lot packed in there in terms of the process. So the salt management plans are a municipal plan. They go through your transportation or your works departments, and they're reviewed and council approves them, is my understanding. What we're doing under the source protection program is looking at those plans, making sure that all the best practices are in place. We're not setting standards in those plans. We're not prescribing amounts of salt that are applied. We're just making sure that under the source protection program, all the considerations have been made to ensure to minimize the amount of salt that could impact the well or the intake. Does that frame it? We're not specifying. We're not going to tell each municipality how much and how and where. But there are minimum requirements, and I'm not saying in terms of road standards. I'm just saying minimum best practices that should be included in a salt management plan. And that's equipment calibration, that's training, that's how you store it, so things like that need to be considered so that everybody's following the same set of standards. Does that help? Because we're not the experts, we're not gonna tell each municipality that may be different how to do their business, but we wanna make sure that there's a level playing field and that everybody is following best practices.
Okay. I think I'm comforted at this time on it.
So if I could follow up with that then, could I just ask then, how much communication is there between the organization and the municipalities on a regular basis that kind of does cover this off? Obviously, there has to be some kind of communication that is happening in this regard, so.
Yeah, so we started last year with the counties as we thought they had fairly robust plans in place and procedures. And even we've learned there are differences between the two counties, quite different in terms of their practices. And so we were using that to create the list of best practices that we thought we could then use for municipal discussions. And we've had a couple meetings with some municipalities just to gauge that, and we're at the discussion phase to find the comfort level. And then it'll have to go through your works departments and then back to your councils for approval if there are changes.
Communication is obviously key, so that's good. Are there any other questions? Member Max, back to you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Back to the risk management plans, Carl. What seems to be the biggest bones of contentions with property owners when you're meeting with them and developing those plans?
This is probably a good segue because you're having the same apprehension as municipalities that landowners have when we first meet with them. Because we're not there to go and tell them you can and can't do something on your property. We're there to make sure you are following best practices for farming, you have the right setbacks, you have the right records for application rates. And if they're doing all those things, which a good farmer should, or a good landowner, then they're covered. So a lot of the risk management plan is documenting what they're doing already and making sure that they follow those best practices. It comes around to good communication with the landowners and an awareness that we're not changing what they're allowed to do. We're just making sure that they're not over applying, not applying right up to the edge of the well, you know, when they're applying, it's appropriate timing and the rates. So it's an awareness and an education, and by the end of the conversation, they agree that they're doing those things already, so they should get credit for that in their plan.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. I mean, I've not heard any complaints from landowners within the source protection areas, but I was just wondering if you were running up against any primary problem areas.
Yeah. We started out quite sort of with a contentious atmosphere, like there was fear that we were gonna come and stop farming practices, and then we get to a point where they understand and they support us, and the word gets out that we're there for all the same purposes to protect the drinking water, and it helps everybody.
Member Maxwell.
I have another question. Fascinating topic here. So, may I ask them, what is the distance that one has to be for this asset management, or sorry, not asset management, the plan? How far out from the well do you need to be this area of concern?
Yeah, it varies on the zones. The main restriction zone is 100 meters around a well where we prohibit application of manures and fertilizers and pesticides under the program. And that's the same with the Nutrient Management Act. So it's consistent with that. And then the zones extend to a 2-year time of travel, 5, 25-year, depending on groundwater flows. So it can be a fairly big zone depending on the well.
Okay. Is there anything else from anyone? If not, thank you, Carl. There's obviously in your agenda, the attachment is there for the annual progress report. We do have a motion that the Gray Sauble Source Protection Authority direct staff to provide the Source Protection Annual Progress Report 2023, along with any comments received from the authority to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks by May 1st, 2024. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Mackey and Member Maxwell. Any further discussion on that report? Seeing none, all in favor? And carried. Thank you. Thanks, thank you, Aaron.
Thanks. And Karen Dillon said for me to make a pitch for the water festival coming up. I'm gonna leave it inside the cookies.
Very smart.
So if you
But between the coffee
have
and
a
the
chance to look at that, that would be appreciated.
thank you.
Thanks.
Is there any other business? I have nothing at this point. If not, I will, confirmation of the next meeting. Do we have a date for the next meeting, Valerie? Sorry.
Yeah, it'll depend on, we anticipate some new Source Protection Committee members being appointed in the next month or so. So, either the next board meeting or the one after.
Okay,
But once we have them all lined up, we'll bring that forward.
thank you. If there's nothing else, then I will call this first meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.
Do you want to take a 5-minute break or do you want to dive right in? All right, then let's switch over to our regular Gray Sauble Conservation Authority board meeting. Each to his own drum. We'll work around you, Tony. So I call the meeting to order, and I will ask Vice Chair Member Dubick if you would be willing to read the land acknowledgement, please.
I will, thank you. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as Treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples.
Thank you very much. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I'm looking at the table, I do not see any, thank you. Call for any additional agenda items. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add? Again, seeing none, have an adoption of the agenda. And I would move that the Great Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors approve the agenda of April 24th, 2024. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Bell and Member Gregg, all in favor? Thank you, carried. And we also have an approval of the minutes. And I would move that the, Member Mackey. Oh, sorry, you're way ahead of me. I move that the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors approve the full authority minutes of March 27, 2024, moved by Member Mackey and seconded by Member Shaw. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Business out of the minutes, we have none at this time, so we'll move to the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they would like to pull? No, thank you. So you will find in your agenda, obviously, the attachments for the environmental planning, section 28 permits and planning applications, administration of receipts and expenses, and the Q1 TD portfolio update. There's also a media attachment. And I would move that in consideration of the consent agenda items listed on the April 24th, 2024 agenda, the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors receives the following items. Number 1, environmental planning, section 28 permits, March 2024. Number 2, A, administration receipts and expenses, March 2024. And 2, B, Q1 TD portfolio update media. Do I have mover and seconder, please? Member Dubick and Member Day, thank you. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Moving to business items, administration under Q1, work plan and update information. Attachment number 6 in your agenda. Tim, are you going to address this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the 2024 work plan is included for the board. There's not a lot to report back at this time as we're only a couple months into the year. But a few items to note. So there's a few items that are highlighted on pages 2 and 3 of that work plan. And otherwise the status updates are provided in the work plan document. But a couple of the items just to bring to your attention. We do have environmental planning agreements as an item in the work plan, and that's going to be delayed, and that's largely because of the extra work that the province has provided for our planning department this year, so that'll delay them a little bit. It's not going to be a big deal for these agreements because without the natural heritage pieces and the other pieces that were extracted by Bill 23 last year, this is really about, we expect these agreements to really be about fee collection and timelines, just so that we're on the same page in terms of making sure that the applications are processed as quickly as possible by both sides. So we'll look to do that later in the year. The regulation mapping is ahead of schedule, so we were forced to make some changes through the recent Regulation 41-24 that came out took effect April 1st. So Gloria Dangerfield will be presenting on that mapping today for the board, as opposed to coming forward in August. Our tree sale is going forward this weekend instead of in May. So thank you for those of you who said you can come out. Anybody who can't make it because you're doing something else, it's a fun day, but that's okay. And anybody who hasn't decided yet, you're encouraged to come out. It's supposed to be warm and raining. But no, it's a good time. It's a great way for Grace Sauble as an organization to engage with the public. And certainly everybody who comes here that day is happy to be here. They're happy to be getting some trees, taking some action, and regardless of the weather we have, they seem to be happy. So we've had snow, we've had everything, but it should be a good day. Anyway, the personnel policy is it's still generally on track, but it's slightly delayed. We were hoping to bring it forward to the March meeting of the board. Right now, staff have put the first draft together, and that draft is out with the management team for review. It'll come back, get revisions, go out to the full staff base for review, get revisions, then we expect that to come to the board in May or June for review, discussion, and hopefully approval. And then the final item is the strategic plan that we are working on a lot right now. And it's a little bit behind schedule because we wanted to give ourselves a bit more time to get the public meetings in. So it will still go forward this year. We left ourselves quite a lot of time in the latter part of the year with the timeline that we set up for the strategic plan. So it's very front end heavy. And so we've just moved that out a little bit to accommodate public meetings, and I'll provide some more information on that later. So those are really the only items of note. And through you, Mr. Chair, I'd welcome any comments or questions from the board.
Any questions for CAO on this? Member Maxwell?
Sorry.
That's it.
I'm
sorry.
Public meetings. So how many will there be and how do you do those?
So we are having 4 meetings, essentially. So the first 2 are tomorrow at the Bayshore Community Center in Owen Sound. So from 1:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon, we've invited all municipal councils and senior staff. And then from 4:30 to 6:30 in the evening, we have it open to the general public. And then we're doing the exact same thing on Monday at Meaford Hall in Meaford. So we sent it to the clerks and CAOs of every municipality and asked them to invite their council and their staff. We've heard back from some, not from others. And so those will be the public meetings.
So you said 4 public meetings?
That's right. Yeah,
So
two tomorrow.
Those two represent 4 meetings then?
Well, there's 2 tomorrow
Yeah.
and then 2 on Monday.
Okay, all right.
So one on Thursday and one on Monday are geared specifically at municipal councils and staff. And then one on each of those days is geared to the general public.
Okay.
We wanted to give an opportunity for municipal councilors and staff to be able to come in and ask questions, have one-on-one time with staff.
I know the timing of those don't always work best with everybody's councils around the table. And I know that's part of the problem here for many of the people around the horseshoe here. But I would encourage everyone to go back and speak with their staffs and try and encourage. Apparently, speaking with Gloria Head, the turnout is fairly light right now, to say the least. It would be nice if we could get a few more people attending, so if you do mention it to your staffs that these are happening, then we might at least be able to encourage a few people to try and attend.
Yeah, and if, like we did hear back from a couple of municipalities that the meetings, the daytime meetings overlap with council meetings, there's no reason that municipal staff and councils couldn't come to the evening ones anyway.
Okay.
It won't be as geared to you, but I mean, quite honestly, if public attendance is light and it's mostly municipal staff and council, it could accommodate the same thing. Otherwise, both locations, we tried to pick 2 locations that are generally central through the watershed. So if one of those events doesn't work for you, there are, like I said, 4 opportunities that staff and council could attend.
Okay. Is there anything else for Tim? Member Maxwell? Mackie? Start with them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that correction. County council is meeting tomorrow, and I know it was mentioned at our last county council meeting, so I expect there'll be a number brought down after our agenda is not that long tomorrow, so I'm hoping that we'll be freed up by 1:30 or 2 o'clock to be able to attend. So, and a lot of the lower tiers won't have council meetings tomorrow, so there's no reason for those councils not to be there if they choose to.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then I will move, whereas via motion FA-24-019, the Board of Directors approved the 2024 priority work plan for the GSCA, and that the GSCA Board of Directors received report 012-2024-Q1 report back on the 2024 priority work plan status as information. May I have a mover and seconder, please? Member Shaw and Member Gregg. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lord. Administration 1B, the GSEA budget update.
Yeah, so the report is a little earlier this time than what I normally get it out, so I do want to just give you a little bit of an update. There are a couple of expenses that we did not have in the GL when I ran the report, so the slight surplus that I've indicated in the report is not going to be quite as large, or is not expected to be quite as large. We had a couple of workstations that we purchased in the first quarter that did not get on the capital budget portion of the document. And we had a few gas receipts for the vehicles that came in after the report was done. So the expenses are just slightly understated in the report. But for the most part, the departments are right on forecast. So anybody has any questions?
Thank you. Obviously, everybody's had a chance to see Appendix 1. The report is in the agenda meeting package. Does anyone have any questions for Allison? And seeing none, whereas the Board of Directors approved the GSEA 2024 operating and capital budget on December 19, 2023 by motion FA-23-122, that the Board of Directors received the 2024 Q1 budget report back as information. I have a mover and a seconder, Member Bell and Member Dubik. Thank you very much. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We're doing for a record here. Sorry. Moving on to water management, there is nothing at this time. So we'll move on to environmental planning and the ERO posting, minister's permit, and review powers. Attachment number 8 in your package. Great, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So if you recall at last month's board meeting, I had provided a report to the board on the new regulation that affects the permitting program for the Environmental Planning Department, as well as an overview of changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into one of those changes, and those are changes that are affording the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry additional powers under the Conservation Authorities Act. And also, what's happened since the last board meeting was that on April 5th, the province released details on a new regulation through the Environmental Registry that spell out how the Minister's permit and review powers were going to work under the Conservation Authorities Act. And this posting is up until May 6th for comments. So the first part is what's under the Act itself, and these are the requirements that are spelled out in the changes to the Act, and that's for the ability for the Minister to issue permits. So right now, the situations where they can issue a permit or an order directing Conservation Authority not to issue a permit, it's discretionary. The notice of any order must be provided to the affected conservation authorities. It would be posted on the Environmental Registry of Ontario for 30 days. And the minister can issue a permit considering the same tests that the CA must consider. And those are related to natural hazards. The minister can also refuse a permit or issue a permit with conditions deemed appropriate by the minister. So what the regulation is going to do is kind of scope the reviews that the minister can undertake. And so what they're proposing that these reviews are to be limited to housing, community services, transportation infrastructure, buildings that facilitate economic development or employment, or mixed-use developments. To me, this reads that the minister is not going to get involved in a situation where there's like someone wants to build a pond on a private property for their own use. So it kind of spelled out the scope in which the minister is going to continue or consider these reviews. In order for the minister to review these situations, the applicant's going to have to provide an overview of their proposed development, why the minister's involvement is being requested, whether the local municipality has endorsed the project, and the status of other pending approvals related to the project. So the other part of the power that the minister has now too is to review a permit decision by the conservation authorities. So that's either to deny the permit or to review the permit that was issued by the conservation authorities with the conditions that were attached to the permit. So this avenue could be taken by someone who's gone through the permitting process with us rather than appealing to the OLT. The minister has 30 days to decide to conduct the review and to receive the request. The interesting part is that if after 30 days the person who's made the request doesn't receive a response by the minister, then they're just to assume that the minister is not going to review the request. The minister can either confirm or vary the CA decision or make a decision including issuing a permit. So if at the board level the permit was denied, the minister receives this request, they could in turn issue the permit over the conservation authority. The minister's decision must be based on the same tests that the CA must consider, and again, those tests are related to natural hazard matters. So the regulation that's being proposed is trying to scope what the minister will consider under what circumstances the minister will consider. So again, it's related to the previous one I just mentioned, but housing, community services, transportation infrastructure, buildings that facilitate economic development or employment, and mixed-use development. And just note that this criteria would not apply to permit reviews related to zoning borders, partly because there's just some different considerations that may have been made where there's a zoning order. If a zoning order was made, the Conservation Authority, we don't have the option not to issue a permit for something. But the conditions are what they really would be reviewing, requesting the minister to review. And again, the person requesting the minister's review in this case, they'd have to provide justification, and this is what the ministry is looking for, an overview of the proposed development. If the request relates to a condition imposed by the Conservation Authority to which the applicant objects, they have to identify the specific conditions that they would like to be reviewed or changes to the conditions and the rationale for that. If the request relates to an authority decision to refuse the permit, the rationale and support for requesting the minister varies the decision, that the minister varies the decision and issues the permit. Why the minister's involvement is requested, so is it of provincial interest, there's timing, urgency matters that could be considered. Permitting process, maybe they had issues with the process, I suppose, or barriers that affected the permit process. And preferable alternative mechanisms in the Conservation Authorities Act. I think one of the things is that the way the province does is that they give us this detail, but they don't give us the actual regulations, so we haven't seen how this is going to look in regulation form yet. They'd also have to provide an indication of whether the local municipalities endorse the project and status of other required approvals. So in terms of next steps, as I mentioned, the posting is up for comments until May 6th, so staff are currently right now considering comments on this. There's no budget implications for the CA as we see it, and there's no proposed communication strategy at this time. Any questions?
Member Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mac. Good afternoon. In our package, it's mentioned twice in your report. One was on page 52 and also again on page 55. And you've just alluded by your comments of saying truly it's still kind of in its development. But there's a comment that's in here indicating whether the local municipality has endorsed the project. And it's a request for the minister's involvement. So if the municipality actually asks, they will be involved. That's how that reads, pretty clear? Are they involved every time without a request?
The municipality?
The minister's office.
No, the minister's office is only involved if they receive the request.
So things can basically carry on through municipal and Ray County,
Yes.
do things,
Yes.
but if there's a request, then they roll up their sleeves and get involved.
Yes, and it has to meet the threshold for them to want to be interested in the request.
Want to be involved?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, so it is discretionary.
okay.
And the regulation is trying to scope the situations that they would consider such a request if they received it. It's just the mechanisms are now there in the Act for proponents to now move to a request to the minister.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
Member Shaw, you had a question?
Yes, so through you, Chair, the minister could not do this before, correct?
correct.
So I'm trying to understand if this is something that we could be affected by, or if this is something that is more likely to affect a conservation area in a part of the province where, say, a highway is going to be built. Because I guess, like, if the minister has to still follow the criteria that the conservation area has to follow, theoretically, we would not be denying a permit for something that was eligible to have a permit, correct? So can you give me a scenario in which this might be used?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm still trying to grasp the scenarios in which this could be used. I think in our neck of the woods, it's probably not something that's going to come up frequent, if at all. Like, for example, the minister's zoning orders have been in place now for a few years, and I think in that time I've only seen one come through. versus down, in the GTA area, the Minister zoning order is a more frequently used tool. So this just, in my mind, this just gives project proponents different avenues to explore. Whether it's going to be worth it for them or not, I don't know. It could just be the minister doesn't want to review it, and then they either go through the OLT process or whatnot. But I don't expect to see many of these. So, and scenarios, yeah, like I said, I'm still trying to, grasp my head around what this, extend to in our case. But we don't have a big highway coming through our neck of the woods, so that part I'm not worried about.
Member Maxwell.
Thank you, Chair, and again, I just don't know how this fits, but I want to ask this question. So we just went through, I don't know if all municipalities are working on this, but we just went through these ARUs. I'm just wondering, will the Conservation Authority be able to comment on these? Because they can significantly impact a small footprint on a piece of property.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So that's one of the comments I might have is how information could flow from our office to the minister's office. The regulation doesn't note anything about communication between the CA and the minister's office. In my opinion, we know our area better than anyone, in the minister's office. So that's one of the questions I certainly have myself. And also kind of back to the previous question about what the minister is going to consider, like they're going to consider the test, but we have policies to support the test. I don't know what policies the minister is going to consider either. So there's a lot of unknowns, like how are they even going to staff this ability to do this? Like I don't think it's going to be directly the minister, it's going to be an employee in the minister's office. So there's a lot of unknowns right now, and how the minister is going to be actually functioning and doing this.
Sure. Thank you. Still
Jen asked my question, and
perfect.
I was struggling with the same thing. I don't believe the minister will be subject to the same requirements that the CA would be, but.
Right. Seems like also a cart and horse thing. We're asking back to speculate on things that we haven't even seen regulation for. It's a little difficult to do, but thank you for trying. Remember, Dave, a question?
Yeah, you actually started answering it with your previous answer just now. I'm curious if this creates required changes at the ministry level, if they have the staff to do this, if they'll be hiring staff to do this, if the staff will have the local knowledge, if the decisions will be made local, from someone in the local area or someone further away in the province in a more central location. I imagine you don't know the answer to this question.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I don't know. They haven't provided us insight. I know Tim has his hand up, so he might have some.
We understand there's a possibility that they may go to private consultants for that. That comes with its own suite of challenges, conflict being one of them. But we don't know for sure at this point.
Any other questions for this hot potato? Okay, if not, thank you, Mac, for the presentation and your work on this. So I'll make the motion that whereas on April 5th, 2024, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry posted ERO posting number 019-8320, which includes details regarding a new regulation for the minister's powers related to Conservation Authority permitting. That the GSEA Board of Directors received the staff report related to ERO posting number 019-8320 as information. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Mackey and Member Day. All in favor? Thank you very much. Carried. Thank you, Mac. Moving on, administration, point 4, operations, there is nothing at this time. Point 5, conservation lands, the Hepworth Management Area mountain biking proposal, attachment number 9 in your packages, and
Thank you very much. I'll set the stage first, and so I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but we own a property just outside of Hepworth on Highway 6, and it's known formally by the Great Sauble Conservation Authority as Hepworth Management Area. It's known more colloquially through the community as Sawmill ski trails. And so the Bruce Ski Club uses this property for cross-country skiing. They've been very successful with it. They have a lot of members. They're a very well-known club. A lot of events are held there. It's a fantastic property in the winter. In the summer, it doesn't get a lot of use. So we had been hoping that there could be another group that would have a compatible use that would be able to utilize the property in the summer. And we've been approached by a mountain bike club. So PASA, P-A-S-A, is the Peninsula Adventure Sports Association. And then this organization, we do partner with on other things. They come through our Spare Rock property for a multi-sport race that they do. Anyway, they've approached us about offering, as a club, mountain biking on the property through the non-snow months. And so the ski club has a lease with us, which is generally 6 months. We give them 6 months exclusive in the winter, 6 months non-exclusive the rest of the year for maintenance and access to the sheds. The idea would be that the bike club would have the exact opposite agreement. And we would have to tweak the agreements a little bit to say, it's not fully exclusive anymore, but anyway, so we have met with the bike club, and their proposal is included in the package as Appendix 2 to this report. And that sounds good to us. Our discussions with them have been really positive. And we also set up a meeting and sat down with the executive from the ski club, just so that we could see if from their perspective, there might be any conflicts, and if there are, how can we address them and stuff. The ski club was extremely positive about this. There is some crossover between members of each club, as you can imagine. They're compatible uses with each other. And so the idea really would be that the ski club predominantly uses broad set pathways through the property that include both skate skiing and track set skiing. And then they have smaller paths through the woods that they utilize for snowshoeing. Turns out the bikers aren't interested in the broad paths. They're interested in those single track skinnier paths through the woods. So the bike club would be interested in using the snowshoe trails as well as setting some new trail for biking. We've had good discussion with them about challenges that other public organizations in the area faced not too long ago with regards to biking, and that really revolved around built infrastructure, so lumber structures like that. So we've agreed collaboratively, that those types of structures wouldn't exist in here. We put up appropriate signage and so on and so forth. So at this point, everything seems very positive. My perspective is that this is a compatible use, it's a good use for the property, and what it does too is it improves the safety of our properties overall because it has more people presence on the property throughout the whole year. That keeps the structures and the trail systems in better repair and keeps the incidents of people doing things they're not supposed to be doing down. So what we'd be looking to do is strike a 5-year lease agreement with the bike club. Similar to what we have with the ski club. A copy of the agreement that we have with the ski club is included in your package just so that you can get a sense of what that looks like. We still need to negotiate some things out, and we need to negotiate the ski club's agreement a little bit too, just to make sure that everything's legally on paper compatible so that we don't have conflicting clauses. In terms of cost or revenue for GSCA, we don't expect any cost to the Conservation Authority. Revenue is going to be either neutral or negligible. So the agreement that we have with the ski club right now is they pay us $1,000 a year. They have a large membership base. Those members pay a fee. Usually we charge a minimum $100 administrative fee to sign contracts with groups. With this group, we would, if they don't charge a membership fee, we may keep it at either just that $100 or no fee. If they do charge a membership fee, then what we would do is we would probably start it at $100 a year and ramp it up until it reaches the $1,000, which is similar to what we did with the ski club. So the ski club, we started at $500 because they had an established base, and we ramped it up over 5 years to $1,000. So at this point, pending discussion and questions from the board, we're seeking direction from the board to negotiate and execute an agreement with the bike club. Turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Worthwhile comments. Member Maxwell?
Sorry. I just have a question to CEO. Tim, so they will be additionally insured, correct, with the board?
Correct.
what does that now, what's that number now, 5 million, 10?
Year 5 is the number we tend to go with, yeah. Yeah, and so one of the things that we'll need to look at too is, we talked about this with both clubs, is any group that uses our property, we are insured anyway. But we make them get their own insurance, and then we make them give us a certificate of insurance that names us as additionally insured with a specific clause in there that says, for clarity, if something happens, your insurance will be used first. So if it exceeds their insurance, then our insurance would be used, not vice versa. The one thing we want to make sure, and this is something with the agreements, one of the nuances, is that because there are now 3 parties involved, we want to make sure that if somebody got hurt skiing, there's no way that liability can be put on the bike club and vice versa, because they really have nothing to do with each other. But yes, everybody has insurance.
Member Mackey?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Tim, just along the insurance line, have we checked with our insurance provider to make sure that this added high-risk activity won't increase our rates?
I don't expect it to. So we're in a group insurance plan with the other conservation authorities, and other conservation authorities do have biking on their property. So the important thing is, what's our duty of care, our standard of care for the property? And if we don't have built infrastructure, it doesn't increase our duty of care outside of a recreational trail. If we did have that built infrastructure, it would, and we specifically don't want them doing that. We will plan to touch base with our insurer, but I don't expect any impact.
I'm glad to hear we're going to touch base with them just to verify, because insurance companies seem to be looking at any avenue right now to increase their premiums, so.
Absolutely. Vice Chair Newman?
So I'm not that familiar with this property, so wondering, is it also known as a hiking property?
We'll go with sort of. Yeah, so this is no, technically no. Technically, it's not really a hiking property. There are running races that happen there, and we've talked to the bike club about making sure that compatible uses like that still have an avenue to carry on. The one thing that was raised by both sides is that some people walk their dogs there. And so we came down to, it does seem like people prefer to walk their dogs on the wide open swaths, not the single lane tracks. And so we want to make sure that we still allow that to happen. Now, we do suspect it's maybe like 5 to 10 people or couples that walk their dogs there, not like it's a place where tons and tons of people are going. The one complaint that will probably arise from this is we strongly suspect that people are running their dogs there as opposed to walking their dogs there, in that we suspect that those dogs aren't on leash. And it's going to be very, very important that people do keep their dogs on leash, so we may hear some concerns from the public about that, but I'm okay with that because those dogs are supposed to be on leash in the first place.
And so then there would be certain signage and communications just so that, the mix of use, people are clear about the mix of use and where best to walk versus biking.
That's right, exactly. And so we've talked about, if people are walking the single track, that we would have to have signage to the effect of who yields to who, with the idea being that bikes would yield to walkers on the wide trails and walkers would yield to bikers on the single track trails.
Follow up with that particular topic.
Sure.
And where the trails cross, the single track crosses the ski trail, who would have priority for an intersection, so to speak?
Yeah, so I don't have all the answers right now, but these are things we're negotiating with them, is how signage is going to work. I think the most important thing is not who has what right of way, as long as everybody understands what the rules are. Yeah.
Okay.
How soon could this agreement be brought into place, Tim?
We're hoping to get these trails going this summer.
Excellent. Member Day?
2 questions. First, I've heard only wonderful things. I talked to some of the mountain bike coaches at school today, and they're excited about formalizing the trails that are there and signage and comprehension about the difficulty of each trail that's there. That's good communication so people know what they're getting into. Question came up around bathrooms. Since this bike club wouldn't be charging a membership fee, then they wouldn't have the money that the ski club has to put in the porta potties in the winter time. And there were some concerns that the summer users, spring fall users are using the woods and leaving some mess behind in that regard. So with an increase in usership, there'd be possibly an increase in need for bathroom facilities as well.
So the bike club will be responsible for the porta potties and how they fund it is up to them.
Oh, okay, and they will be there. So that's great. And the bike club is also responsible for maintaining the trails, from what I understand. I have learned that it's possible there might be some folks building jumps in the woods, and those hopefully would be dismantled by the trail builders and the volunteers coming through.
That's right. So the really good thing about having an organized group like this on the property is that they can manage all of those things. So we don't have to have staff running out. 3 days later, people rebuild those structures with a group like this on the site all the time and going through it. They can keep that under control. So from Grace Sauble's perspective, this is really, really positive, and I think for the community, it's a real win-win.
Michelle?
So I'll just add, I guess, formally, it sounds very similar to what the Branch Act has down south of Paisley. There's mixed-use trails there. It's very clearly marked difficulty and who can use what trails how. So I think this is really great to see, and it's exciting for the Hepworth area.
Member Maxwell?
Thank you, Chair. So, not to be the negative person here, but I just want to ask this one question. There's no other competing organizations within that framework, is there? Like, say, Colquhoun Uplands, you got Green County Forest, you got M&R. Dues, insurance would be totally different than Gray Sauble's. To align, so it's all Gray Sauble conservation land?
Yes. Yeah, so if you look at the map that's provided, the ski club actually currently uses a private property to the, I can't rationalize which, or figure out which direction to push right now, but yeah, if I walked into it on the right-hand side, there's private property that the ski trails go on, and then off to the left side, there's a private property that's owned by a trailer park that the trails go on. Our agreement would be just for the trails on the Gray Sauble property. So currently there is a gate system that's closed off on the trailer park side, and we would have to do similar fencing, maybe just snow fencing, to block off the trails on the other private property side, unless the bike club can secure agreements with those property owners as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? The only thing I might add, I'm just curious, and I think it's excellent, and anything that we can do to support recreation for the community is excellent. My only question is, land is very valuable, and I'm just wondering where the $1,000 a year figure derived. I think of places like Highland, and what people pay to ski at those places. And I know the bike club would not be in as much of a position as the ski club probably to cover costs like that. And I was just wondering, not that I want to take advantage of any recreational groups, but is $1,000 is really not a lot of money for land these days for use.
Yeah, both these organizations are volunteer organizations, and we're just trying to promote healthy outdoor recreation.
Okay. Great. So if there are no other questions, then I will read the motion. Whereas the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority is the owner of the lands known to us as the Hepworth Management Area, here in the site, in the municipality of Georgian Bluffs, and whereas under Section 21 and of the Conservation Authorities Act, GSCA has the ability to collaborate and enter into agreements with ministries and agencies of government, municipal councils, and local boards and other organizations and individuals. And whereas under subsection D of Section 21 of the Conservation Authorities Act, the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority may lease for a term of 5 years or less land acquired by the authority. That the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors direct staff to negotiate and execute an agreement with the PASA Mountain Bike Club for their use of the Hepworth Management Area. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Shaw and Member Gregg, all in favor? Carried, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, that's very good. Point 6 under administration, forestry, there's nothing at this time. Point 7, communication, public relations, nothing at this time. And point 8, education, the same. 9, GIS IT, the regulation mapping update information, attachment 10 in your package, and Gloria.
So normally I'd be coming to you at about this time or a little bit later in the year to talk about our standard mapping updates. We have something similar except that we have a new regulation. So as you're all aware by now, Ontario Reg 151-06 was revoked on April 1st. So now we're working under 41-24, prohibited activities, exemptions, and permits. So to meet the requirements of that regulation, we've created a whole new mapping data set. So I'm going to walk you through some examples of that mapping and show you some of the changes. So the ones that specifically relate to mapping, we've discussed a few of them already, but there's the reduced allowance, and that's for provincially significant wetlands. So that's from 120 meters to 30 meters, and I will show you an example of that. The other change is that all wetlands are now mapped with that 30-meter allowance. Previously, wetlands that were 2 hectares or less, it was just the boundary of the wetland that was mapped. Now we have that additional 30-meter buffer on those as well. The other change was that definition to watercourses. So the previous definition was an identifiable depression in the ground in which the flow of water regularly or continuously occurs. And the new definition is a defined channel having a bed and banks or sides in which flow of water regularly or continuously occurs. So that one will take quite a bit of work, and we are not doing one larger swoop of mapping updates with that one because it's going to take a lot more work in terms of checking either on site or using some of our mapping software that allows us to see in 3D, and I will get to that a little bit later. The final one that we haven't actually discussed previously was that in the previous reg, it stated that the mapping must be on file at the administration center of the authority. It still says that, however, it also says it has to be made available through web mapping. So I'm sure many of you have used web mapping at your counties, both Great Rivers counties have good web mapping applications. That is now a requirement. It has been standard practice for quite some time, but we are now required to do that. So I can just...
We can have questions as we go so we don't lose them. Member Mackey?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just wondering about the definition of the water course, particularly water flowing regularly and continuously. Like I can think of a number of creek beds that will have all the other factors, but do not run continuously. And I guess, what does regular mean? Like, if regular is for 6 months of the year, are we eliminating a lot of water courses that aren't continuous, I guess is the question.
I think the key thing is the banks and the sides. We do have some water courses mapped as ephemeral, so those are those ones. But you could argue that something that flows regularly, if it flows every spring, that is a regular flow.
But continuous shouldn't be in there then.
It says continuously or regularly.
So it's one or the other.
Yeah, so the big thing is that banks or sides, because previously we were, well, we'll still map them, but we were regulating things like swales, where there is water that flows, but through an identifiable depression, but there's no banks or sides. So that's the place where we're gonna have to really look at our data. We, again, won't remove them from our mapping, but we will mark it as regulated or not. And then we will have to remove those types of features from the regulations.
Thanks, Blair.
Member Maxwell?
Thank you, Chair. So we have, on occasions, coming up on developments, the realignment of streams or water courses comes up. When we're talking about realignment, how is that regulated by Great Sauble? And the other thing is, it stream ends up being encapsulated, how does that work?
Okay, so just keep in mind that we're just talking about mapping right now.
Mapping,
So some of these
okay.
questions might be referred to MAC.
Ah,
So if a feature on the ground is realigned,
yeah,
we then remap it
oh, good.
from my end. I don't know if MAC has any
I
other
think that's
comments.
what I wanted to know. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
So we, on a yearly basis, since 2006, since the original Reg 151-06 regulation came out, every year we have been presenting mapping updates because we continuously are improving the mapping. We get better information all the time, so we're constantly improving that information.
Okay.
And it is important to remember that it is the text of the regulation that takes precedence over the mapping. So other than the changes to the wetland setback, the same principles apply to our mapped, the physical features that we map on the ground and their associated setbacks or allowances. So I'm gonna just step you through some examples so that you can, I don't think I brought any examples forward last year, but so that you can see some of the things and how we map them. And actually move that forward. So the first is for watercourses. So we map what's called a meander belt. So the setback for this is 10 times the bank's full width of the watercourse with an additional 15-meter allowance on either side. Now, as you can probably imagine, we don't have the widths for many watercourses measured. We have thousands of watercourses in our watershed, and we haven't gone and measured every single width. So the default width is 1.5 meters. So that's the standard that we apply. So you can see, maybe, these guys here. Those are all the sort of standard default 30-meter width. So it's 1.5 times 10, and then we add that additional 15 meters, so that's 30 meters. There are cases where we have measured the width. So you can see, well, maybe you can't see, but in here, there's some red lines, and that's where I've gone in and actually, using the air photos, drawn the width. So what you then do is you take an average of each stretch of common width. So you take that average width and you multiply that by 10 on either side and add an additional 15 meters. So in the case where your river is 5 meters, you're then multiplying it by 10. So you have 50 meters and then you have that additional 15, so it's a 65-meter buffer. So in some cases, and you can see here, the orange is the previous regulation. This is a PSW here. So that did have 120-meter setback on it, and then it was reduced again to the 30. However, after measuring the width of this river that flows through here, there is a bit of an additional meander belt, so it's the non-standard one. It's not 1.5, it's much larger than that. So the other regulations associated with watercourses are confined valley systems. So those are systems where there's actual steep banks on either side of a watercourse. So then we map for those erosion hazards in those areas. So we have what we call a stable slope setback. We have stable slopes. So those are ones that are less than a 3-to-1. Or less than 33%. So when we're calculating slope, we use rise over run. So the height of the slope divided by the horizontal distance across. So there's an example here. We have a 10-meter slope in this area. The distance across, horizontal distance is 50 meters. So that's a 20-meter slope. It's less than the 33%. So in those cases, all we do is we map the top of the bank and add a 15-meter setback to it. So that's what's shown here. These black lines are the top of the bank with that 15-meter setback on top.
Member Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Gloria, would these new mappings like I'm thinking in some of our towns where an old existing building might be close, if it was torn down, will this new setback apply?
So this is not a new setback, this is the same principles we've always used for our mapping.
Well, there's lots of buildings that, I guess, before we had any principles, and a lot of buildings were built. If they were torn down, could a new building be constructed on the same footprint?
And that's a question for them. I don't know. All right, so,
Sorry, just before you go on,
Yeah.
Member Maxwell?
Yes, okay, for mapping purposes, does it matter if the stream is a cold water stream for mapping
not for
purposes?
mapping purposes, no.
Not at the Great Sauble level?
We mapped all the streams that we see
Okay,
on the landscape, yeah.
that was, okay.
Okay, so the next type of confined valley system is unstable slopes. So that's, again, that 3-to-1 slope. So if it's a greater than 3-to-1 or greater than 33%, if you like to work in degrees, that's about 18.5 degrees, 18.4 degrees. If it's greater than that, then what we do is we digitize the toe of the slope, and we multiply the height by 3. So in this case, we have a 30-meter high slope. You multiply it by 3, so we have 90 meters. And then, so you buffer the toe of the slope by 90 meters. That's your stable slope setback. And then you add another 15. Now, in the case of those unstable slopes, if the toe of the slope is within 15 meters of the watercourse, then there's an additional toe erosion allowance. So in some cases it could, in this case here, where the toe of the slope is close to the watercourse, it's 90 meters plus an additional 30. So that setback there is 120 meters from the toe. Oh, and I just highlighted this because I've had a lot of questions about clipped out areas, and that's if there's an aggregates license or regulations don't apply. So the next type of regulation associated with rivers or watercourses are floodlines. So this is an engineered flood area. So it's whatever the regulatory storm is on most of our rivers. It's the Timmins storm. On the Sauble, it's the 100-year storm. And so this is an area that we have engineered flood mapping for. So it's simply that line plus 15 meters. We do have some estimated flood-prone areas that is observed flooding. It's not a modeled flood, but we have observed it and we've mapped that as well as regulated. So for the shoreline, the standard is, so this blue line here is the 100-year flood line along the shoreline. We had that originally mapped through the flood damage reduction program in the 90s. And we have since updated where we had information. We flew LiDAR back in 2019, and now we have a full LiDAR data set. The 2019 stuff was just in Grey County. So we have updated it based on the 2019 LiDAR. We haven't gotten to the 2020 stuff yet. So it's just an improvement to the information again. And so the wave uprush is 15 meters from the 100-year line and then an additional 15-meter allowance.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Gloria, the 100-year line, is that the typical defined high water mark along in the shoreline? Like, you know, you've got your water's edge, you've got your beach area, and then there's usually a definite high water mark, observable high water mark. Is that our 100-year line?
Not really. Mac, do you want to?
Yeah. So the 100-year line is actually a specified elevation. So it depends on where you are on the shoreline. In that example, Gloria was showing us 177.9. It's changed based on the data we use, but the observable high water mark might not coincide with that specific elevation point. So we'll often see that in the survey where the surveyor will show an observable high water mark. And sometimes the 100-year can coincide with that. Sometimes it's further inland. It just depends on the topography at that site.
The next type of shoreline setback is the dynamic beach. So it's essentially 30 meters from the shoreline hazard and then an additional 15. And then shoreline erosion, it's mapped the same as we would map the confined valley systems using so this is a very steep slope here. This is our Spirit Rock property. So obviously very steep. So using that 3-to-1 setback from the toe and then the additional 30 meters, 50-meter toe erosion allowance and then the additional 15. And finally, the wetlands, as we've discussed, the orange is the previous 120-meter setback. So that's the 90 meters difference there that's been removed, and now it's all 30 meters. In terms of total area difference between the old one, the old reg and the new reg, we're looking at about 6,500 hectares, which is about 16,000 acres. And just quickly, I did want to touch on data updates because this is something that we work on continuously to improve our information and how we map our base data. This is just sort of a listing of ways that we map and information that we use. I mentioned the LiDAR, light detecting and ranging. It's using a laser, timed lasers from an airplane, and that was the full coverage of our watershed was captured in 2020. We have not begun to use it to its full extent. We're still looking at the data and getting used to it, and we will be able to do quite a few good updates there. That's just an example of some LiDAR point clouds. And then with the LiDAR data, essentially we're using it as a digital elevation model. So that's a raster that depicts either height or slope or a hillshade. And from that you can create contours or whatever products you want. And these are just some different ways of viewing it with the coloring of height, the hillshade. And this is actually a slope raster. So that using these types of digital elevation models, we can actually tell it to show us the 20% slope and the 33% slope in different colors to help us identify those areas quickly. And then finally, our stereo system, I think all of you have seen it, but it is a huge amount of help in identifying and mapping slope areas or identifying water features. This is one of the products you can get out of it, sort of the 3D look and feel, that seeing things in actual stereo with depth is extremely helpful when we're mapping features. So, and that was this map down here is just an example of some of the toes and tops of slopes that we captured in stereo. And I believe that's it.
Thank you, Maria. That really, the examples do really help. That makes such a difference. Thank you. Well, I wasn't expecting to be doing math today, so that's good. Does anybody else have any questions for Gloria, Vice Chair Dubick?
Thank you. So thank you for this. This is really great. So just a question about mapping and the online availability of the maps. What is the official source of Gray Sauble maps? Where do we keep that?
Are you referring to where do we get our data, or
how do we provide it to the public?
Oh, okay. So I actually forgot to get to that. Sorry about that. Under the financial and budgeting implications, so we used to have an application called Cardo. It was a free application. It is now deprecated, and that is on our website. If you go to About, there is a regulation mapping link there. And I can certainly send it to everybody if you want to share it with people. We have now updated it to an application called Mango Maps. There's much more functionality, the source, like the base information within it, like the air photos that they use. Just the capabilities within it are much, much better, and it is very up to date. So we are using the trial version of Mango Maps currently. It is on the website now. However, we will need to move to the paid version. So it's that, the cost associated with that is $900 a year. However, I did state in my report that I believe we have enough contingency that we put in our contracts and services budget that should cover it. We shouldn't go beyond that. So yeah, right from our website. And then we also do share with the Bruce County and Grey County GIS folks, and they put it on their web mapping sites. I don't believe they've put them up yet.
And if I just, so as a follow-up, then what is the most recent information available on our site?
This data, I exported it for regulations, I exported it last week. However, I'm going to be updating it again probably tomorrow. So I try and really, especially on ours, because I know sending it to the counties, it takes a little longer, but on ours, I'd like to try and keep it as up to date as possible.
Okay.
And then our planning staff are using the most current information on a day-to-day basis.
Remember the next one?
Listen, I have a question. So the private sector could take this mapping to the bank and use it for their purpose? Like say a developer or whatever wanted to look at this and use it?
They can use it, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no other questions, so I'll sort of piggyback on Nadia's question. So satellite imagery, the GIS county, they tend to be a few months behind.
It's 5 years.
I was gonna say,
Yeah,
okay, I was underestimating.
Yes.
It was old.
So through SWOOP, the Western Ontario Orthography Program,
Right.
that is a 5-year flight schedule.
Okay,
So the last ones that were flown in 2020, so they're already going to be flying again next year.
okay, thank you.
It flies by.
It does. Any other questions? If not, I will read the motion that the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors receive staff report 015-2024 for information. May I have a mover and a second, please? Member Farmer and Member Gregg, all in favor? Thank you, carried. Thank you. Moving on, there is no GWSP RMO report, so we'll move on to the CAO report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few things to report. It's been an exceedingly busy month. So on March 28th, immediately following our last board meeting, I went to the Town of Blue Mountains office to attend the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative meeting. Really good meeting. I hadn't been to one before. It was good to see the lobbying that's being done across both the Canadian side and the US side of the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence system to drive awareness, but also try to increase funding to go towards projects that impact those systems. And so that could be everything from ensuring the water stays clean to ensuring people stay safe. And it was good to see several members there. Member Mackey was there, Member Maxwell, and Member
Sorry. Correction.
Carl.
I missed it. I wasn't allowed to go to it.
Oh, sorry. And Member Carlton was there. Anyways, I think it's a great collaborative, and they'll be hosting a binational meeting in Montreal next month. I'm unfortunately unable to attend that, but it would have been nice to see.
You got to go to Collingwood.
I know. Our Indigenous Relationships Committee met on April 5th. It was a good meeting. There was good discussion, but there are no action items to report back to the board at this time. Member Vice Chair Dubik and I attended Conservation Ontario Council meeting last Monday. That was their AGM, so they did elect a new board. So they have a board of directors that is made up of 6 members, and then they have a council that is made up of all of the conservation authorities. And they operate differently, where the council meets quarterly, the board meets more regularly. And so I'll let you know who their board is, and if you ever are wondering about it again, you can either ask me or you can go to Conservation Ontario's website. But the chair is Chris White. He was re-elected. He is a mayor out of the Kitchener-Waterloo area. I'm not sure his exact municipality, but he is the chair of the Grand River Conservation Authority. The first vice chair and second vice chair are Pat Warren from Kawartha Region Conservation and Jonathan Scott from Nottawasaga Conservation. And then the directors are Rob Baldwin, so he is the CAO at Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, and Chandra Sharma, who is the CAO at Niagara Region. And unfortunately, there was another member too, Brad, I forgot his name down, so I can't report on that. Anyway, it was a good meeting, and I think it was very good for Member Dubik to be there as well and see the broader network across the province that we do work with. Other things that have been going on, we already talked about the strategic planning meetings. I do hope that everybody can make it. Now, if you can't, that's okay, because there'll be lots of opportunity for you as the board to be engaged. It really would be nice if your council or staff could be there, though, to provide any input that they may have. But failing that, we will be sending a survey out to all municipalities and your staff to be able to fill out. So we have surveys for different user groups, and municipalities and municipal staff are one of those groups that we've designed a survey specifically for, so there will be that opportunity as well. And additionally to those strat plan meetings, we hope to have a display at our tree sale on Saturday, as well as we'll be at the Home and Cottage Expo. So Mac and his team are spearheading the Home and Cottage Expo to let people know about planning and regulations, but we're going to use that opportunity to have information about some of our other programs, including our strategic plan as well.
What specific user groups would you be reaching out to?
For with our surveys?
Yes.
So we put together a list of partners and stakeholders that's about 70 groups long. So we'll be reaching out to them directly with a partners and stakeholders specific survey. We have a survey specific to our volunteer groups. We have a survey specific to staff. We have a survey specific to municipalities. And then we also have an opportunity for the general public to comment. So we have a client services survey. And that particular one will be tagged to all of the emails that staff send out. There will be a Dropbox where people can do hard copies at all of the municipal offices as well as libraries to provide opportunities for people who don't have access to a computer. And then in addition to that, we have what we're calling the Goals to Action survey, so where the other surveys are really about informing the organizational excellence piece of the strategic plan, the Goals to Action survey is about asking people within the framework of the goals that we've set for the organization and the strategic plan, what do you want to see us do? How do you expect us to reach those goals? What actions should we take? And everybody will have an opportunity to speak on that. I've also reached out to the 2 First Nations communities. I've heard back from the Nawash First Nation community, and their senior executive officer is going to be taking that to the idea of me coming to Band Council, to their Band Council this week, and they'll get back to me with some dates so that I can go and talk to Chief and Council, and then I'm hoping to get the same opportunity for Saugeen First Nation. Understanding those communities are not within our watershed jurisdiction, but our watershed jurisdiction is entirely within their traditional territories.
I think Member Farmer has a question.
Thank you. Through the chair, would it be beneficial to, or is there a plan to engage in some of the formats that local media provide for live conversations, things like the Open Line or their Rogers TV shows, to help to spread the word about that and promote the work of the Conservation Authority, as well as participation in the survey? Or does having at least 70 partner organizations and all these other options cover enough of the visibility?
I think that the visibility is covered. So the format that we decided on when we started this process is that it was going to be tiered in terms of the level of engagement we were seeking. with the board and staff having the highest priority for engagement, municipalities and our direct volunteer organizations being at sort of the next tier, partners and stakeholders being the next tier where we're reaching it directly, and then the general public being the lowest tier, simply because they may have a one-off relationship with the Conservation Authority. And so that's how we've been focusing our efforts.
Just before you carry on, the Home and Cottage Expo, can you just share when and where?
Yes, so,
May 11th and 12th,
thank you.
Mother's Day weekend.
No.
Yes, yeah, so May 11th and 12th at the Bayshore Community Center in Midland Center.
Thank you.
This is the Bruce Gray Home and Cottage Expo, not the Ontario.
It's cheaper to attend.
Okay. Okay. We do have, as I mentioned a couple times now, we have our tree sale coming up this Saturday. It is a great event. It's good for the organization as well as the community. And if you want to come out, let me know or let Mike know, Mike Fry. And the event starts at 8 o'clock. People start lining up before I get here, and I get here at 7. So some people are very eager to get their trees, but anyway, it is a fantastic event, and I encourage you to come if you can. Even if you can't come to volunteer, I encourage you to stop by during the day if you're in the area. And finally, I do want to mention the Earth Film Festival again. We mentioned it at the last meeting. We do have several posters here if anybody's interested. The event is taking place on May 16th, so that is a Thursday night, I believe. And it's at 7 p.m. During the day, there will be 2 showings for school groups, and those typically sell out. I fully expect that this one is, well, sell out is they fill up. And I fully expect that this one is too. So there are 2 films. There will be a youth panel there to speak to the audience. It should be a really great event. They always are. This one has the extra special piece of having Autumn Pelletier there, who is a water walker. And Autumn's actually a really big deal. Like, she does this. It's a big deal that she's coming to Owens Sound to do this. So a great opportunity. For those that are interested, there is also a dinner option beforehand. That's the dinner's being put on by Zach Keyshake at the Owens Sound Farmers Market. And so you can get tickets for the dinner and the show, or just the show. There's a silent auction, and the items will be on display at the show. It's a very good networking event as well. And again, it's the foundation that puts it on for us, but it's a really great face for the foundation and the Conservation Authority in terms of getting into the public and having those dialogues. And I forgot to mention it, but we talked with the foundation, we'll probably try and set up a strat plan display at this event as well, just to, reach out to as many people as we can while we're in the community.
Thank you.
That's what's going on.
Thank you. I don't really have anything for the chair report. I wanted to thank Vice Chair Dubik. I had a conflict, could not attend Conservation Ontario AGM. She went to my stand. Thank you very much for that. She said it was actually quite enjoyable. I'm sorry I missed it. The only thing I will, Member Maxwell handed me this just before the meeting, and I don't know if anybody knew about the Teeny Tiny Summit event in Holstein, which will be happening on Tuesday, 28th of May from 9 to 4. You are going. I don't know if anyone else is planning to attend, but it's an in-person event, lunch and refreshments throughout the day. So if anybody was interested, tickets are on Eventbrite, but I'm sure you can find out more about it through Holstein municipality. Yes?
So there's something tied to Roma. Member Mackey, I would think it'd be all over that because it pertains to agriculture.
Roma spots.
Yeah, it's the Omafra Teeny Tiny Summit.
Yeah.
So whether
Haven't heard anything about it.
you might want to look at that just before.
They're very economic development and community development focused. So it's been virtual for the last 3 years during COVID. They're usually very good. Yeah, economic development. I would say.
Excellent. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. So I don't have anything else to report, and we have no closed session today. So at the dot of 3 o'clock, I will adjourn the meeting.
Nicely done.